שגריר האיחוד האירופי בישראל, דימיטר טזאנצ'ב, שלום.
שלום וברכה.
אז קודם כל אנחנו נפעמנו מהעברית שלך קצת, אתה 9 חודשים בתפקיד, היית כבר כמה קדנציות, אז תודה שאתה מגיע לנו קודם כל.
תודה להזמנה.
So we have some issues on our table. Let's start with the political situation in Israel. How concerned are you about the instability here in Israel?
Well, Israel is a living democracy and it undergoes its own political processes. We hope that the Israeli people and the Israeli politicians will choose the right way for them and for their people.
However, is the EU worried from the possible consequences of another elections in Israel, maybe not the last one?
Well, elections are the most normal thing to happen in every democracy, and Israel is not an exception of the rule, though elections are everywhere.
But 5 times in 2 years.
Yes, but I would say that in the last months we have seen very dynamic cooperation between the European Union and Israel, so we hope this cooperation will continue. After the elections, during the electoral campaign, we are very much encouraged by the positive attitude of this government towards the relations with the European Union. We are discussing together interesting areas of cooperation where we have a common interest, European Union and Israel. So this will continue. Elections are a normal thing to happen in every democracy.
Okay. So let's continue with Iran, one of the critical issues, of course, in Israel and the EU. Also, from your perspective, what are the chances at the moment for a new nuke deal with Iran?
Well, for the moment, the negotiations are rather frozen. They are not progressing, but you know that we, the European Union and Israel, are sharing the same goal. We want to prevent any chance that Iran will become nuclear. And the European Union has focused its efforts in the negotiations that we believe will revive the JCPOA in a better way, because our understanding is that with an agreement that will set a mechanism allowing the international community to control on any attempts by Iran to enrich uranium is better than having no agreement.
Okay, better than having no agreement, but we know that according to a report on CNN, Israel is keeping the US and probably, and we assume also the EU, out of loop on alleged covert operation in Iran. What are your thoughts on this option of operation in Iran, Israeli operation in Iran?
Well, the European Union always has focused on diplomatic channels and diplomatic tools to solve crises. So we believe the best way to solve the issue with the Iranian nuclear threat is to solve it through negotiations and through international agreement with very strong control mechanism.
But do you believe we can achieve this agreement with diplomatic ways?
We hope, because we had the example of the JCPOA from 2015, and it was an agreement that was working.
But does Israel have the EU backup regarding the Iran nuke plan? Israel has the EU backup regarding any option?
No, I mean, Israel decides what to do. Our understanding is that we should deal with this issue in diplomatic channels.
But in your opinion, Iran wants to achieve this agreement?
I believe Iran is also engaged in these negotiations. It didn't leave the negotiations for the time being, and for the time being, we try to work and to use any chance until there are chances.
So do you believe we can stop Iran's aspiration regarding its nuke plan?
Well, our understanding is that there is a threat. The threat is that Iran could become nuclear. We want to prevent this. We engaged in negotiations. We have achieved an agreement. This agreement, the implementation of this agreement has been stopped. Now we'd like to revive it. Until there are chances, we'll be there and we'll work in order to achieve what we believe is the right. The right is to have control mechanism that will involve the international community and that will set clear standards and tools to control any attempts by the Iranians to enrich uranium beyond what they...
So, Ambassador טזאנצ'ב, our next issue is the landmark gas agreement with Egypt and the EU and, of course, Israel. How strong are the energy ties between the EU and Israel?
The energy cooperation between EU and Israel is an example how we can further cooperate and expand what we already have as a cooperation between us. We, the European Union, we support the Abraham Accords, we support the normalization between Israel and its Arab neighbors, close and not so close. This is an agreement that comes in a moment where the European Union is seeking for alternative sources of energy. In the moment when there is a new cooperation being born in the Eastern Mediterranean, and we believe there are mutual benefits for all the three sides participating in this agreement: Israel, European Union, and Egypt.
Can Israel replace Russia in a way in this area, Gaza?
Well, Israel could be an important source of alternative supplies of energy, and we should here speak not only about gas, but also looking in the future with the electricity production, with renewable energy, with hydrogen, low-carbon hydrogen. This is a cooperation that is, I would say, very attractive for all the sides participating, and it's also cooperation that involves not only Israel and EU, but it involves other countries from the region, and we believe this is a very important signal to the region as well.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of Russia and the gas, let's talk about the war. The war that continues in Europe. So the Ukraine ambassador to Israel has slammed Israel not once over its position regarding the war. In your opinion, is he right?
Well, what I can say that we see the efforts Israel is doing to host and to welcome scores of thousands of Ukrainian refugees. We saw, and I have personally discussed this, the Israeli Foreign Ministry organized the TV bridge with, I've seen the efforts of deploying military hospital in Ukraine, the efforts of Israel to help Ukraine. And I believe that we should applaud these efforts, the efforts of the Israelis to support Ukraine. Of course, the European Union faces one of the biggest challenges, if not the biggest one in its history, and all the EU member states are involved in bigger efforts. So any partner, any friend of European Union that could add more to these efforts and could give its contribution is welcome.
And will the European Union impose more sanctions on Russia?
Sanctions are not a goal by themselves. They are a tool which we use to achieve our main goal, which is stop the war, stop the atrocity, restore the territorial integrity and sovereignty for Ukraine, and stop the suffering of the Ukrainian people, and bring those who are responsible for what is going on, for this war, bring to justice. So if there will be a need, the European Union will discuss new sanctions. Sanctions, as you have seen, they've gone through several stages. There are now 6 packages of sanctions, and each package is based on the assessment what is the rightest moment and the rightest tool to be used.
And you have mentioned the tools. So what is the strongest tool of the European Union in order to stop this war, to stop Putin?
Well, I mean, the sanctions are one of the most influential tools we're using, but we also try to support we try to support the Ukrainians by any other means, through programs, through finances, in order to a little bit alleviate the sufferings of the Ukrainian people and to prevent the destruction of the infrastructure of this country.
Ambassador דימיטר טזאנצ'ב, thank you so much. תודה רבה על התשובות בכל הנושאים האלה. תודה שהיית איתנו.
המון תודה. המון תודה.